Summertime means the grill's back. The Big Joe charcoal smoker that I got last year is a really nice piece of equipment, but it's a little notorious on this channel because I have had some issues with it. One, that I'm really an inexperienced novice when it comes to grilling and smoking things, and two, the grill is just so big that it's kind of hard to work with, especially when it comes to fueling it. However, ribs are supposed to be some of the easiest things to grill / smoke. I was going to have the family over for barbecue, so let's see if this turns out better than my brisket. So I'm starting with 4 racks of baby back pork ribs. 4 is way too much for one family, but it's what I could fit on my Big Joe, so I decided to make all of it. These are nice because they're lean and they don't have much trimming for you to do at all, aside from tearing off the membrane on the back, which is simple to do with a paper towel. So I don't think this step is absolutely necessary like it was with my brisket, but I'm going to dry brine these ribs. It's mainly because I can spread the work out more and have less to do on cooking day. It does season the interior and dry out the exterior for a better bark, but with ribs not being super thick, I think this is something you could do on the day of and not see a noticeable difference. So I'm first patting the ribs dry and then I'm going to salt them. Keeping your salt separate from your rubs helps you to be more precise with it, which matters to me. I'm generously giving it salt on both sides before hitting it with my barbecue rub. This might be controversial, but I don't think barbecue rubs are absolutely necessary when smoking meats. To me, the 3 most important factors when smoking meat are salt, lots of pepper, and smoke, obviously. Everything else you do, in my opinion, is just supplementary. But barbecue rubs do be tasting good though, so mine might vary from time to time, but this is how I made it this time. I'll estimate quantities below, but the majority of this is going to be lots of freshly ground black pepper. To me, this flavor needs to be the most prominent when you're eating meat off the grill, and freshly ground always tastes better, even though it takes a long time when doing it in this quantity. So like 2 parts of that to 1 part of almost everything else. And the everything else is garlic powder, onion powder, celery salt, and underrated spice. Some ground mustard, I really like the taste of it on barbecue. If I wasn't doing the dry brine, I would just leave this out of the rub and use regular mustard as a binder. Finally, like 2 parts of smoked paprika and just a hint of cayenne pepper. Mix all that up and you have a barbecue rub you can use on ribs or brisket or anything else that you're gonna smoke. I also have some old rub left over from I think a pulled pork. It's a little different than what I have in here, but I'm just going to add that in and combine it. I think it has a little brown sugar in it, which I left out of my rub because I'm going to include brown sugar as part of my smoking process later.
If it doesn't look like Dorito dust, then you should not trust.
You can take that and generously spread it across both sides of all the ribs. Really rub that in, or else it's just a barbecue sprinkle. Then I place a few of these cooling racks into my refrigerator to let air circulate around these. You'd probably be okay putting them on top of foil or plates with the bone side down if you had to. But I load these into my fridge and repeat the whole seasoning process with the rest of my ribs. They're going to chill in there overnight and be nice and dry for us to cook tomorrow. Now the next day comes the most daunting part of the process for me, which is managing the grill. I just had a lot of issues with temperature control with the brisket, and I really hope it doesn't happen again. To aid with that, I bought some of these briquettes instead of just the regular charcoal. I need to get some lump as well, but I read that's better for really high searing, and the briquettes are really good for long lasting heat for like smoking like we're doing today. So first I'm going to load my chimney about 80% full with briquettes, just a wild guess. Light those, which they light a lot faster than regular coals, so this is like 15 to 20 minutes. At this time, I also pulled out my ribs from the fridge to let them start coming to room temperature. In the meantime, I'm cleaning out my grill and setting it up for our smoking. Just clearing out the ash from the last cook and loading in a lot more unlit briquettes for more fuel. Then I'm adding in arguably what affects the flavor the most, which is our smoking wood. I'm using about 4 of these hickory wood chunks, and then I have a bag of these cherry wood chips. The chips aren't really used in charcoal smokers, you're supposed to use the chunks, but I just have these and I read you can just sprinkle them on top of the coals and they're fine. So I nestled in my 4 hickory chunks and then spread across some of the cherry chips. Once my chimney is showing that most of my briquettes are white hot, which means they're lit, I can dump that in as well. I'm first going to close up the grill to let the dome start to heat up on its own before I add everything to start inhibiting the heat. Then after about 5 minutes, I'm going to assemble everything for double indirect cooking, which is great for smoking. First, my 2 heat deflector plates, then my X accessory rack so that I can add my pizza stone on top of that. These will just protect the direct flames from overcooking the ribs. I've got a couple of aluminum trays just to catch drippings and keep things cleaner on top of the stone. Then my 2 cooking racks, and now I'll close up the grill and let it start coming to temperature. I eventually want to end up between 275 and 300 degrees Fahrenheit for smoking. In my brisket video, I was never able to settle on a temperature, so I was kind of worried at this point. And of course, at first the flames come all the way to the top of the grill and hit the thermometer, so it gives it all kinds of crazy readings. And probably after like 5 to 10 minutes, I started closing the bottom vent, and somehow, some way, my temperature was starting to settle where I wanted it to. It was some kind of magic because I didn't really have to fool with this a lot, it just kind of went where I wanted it to. I mainly kept the bottom vent closed almost all the way, just a sliver, and used my top vent to really control everything. So when this was steadying around 300 degrees Fahrenheit, I figured it was safe to add my ribs. So I squeezed all of those absolute boys onto the grates, closed up the grill, and continued to monitor it. And to my shock, it continued to still settle around the temperature that I wanted it to. I closed up the vents just a bit more so it would drop down closer to 275, and it did. I was planning on being stuck there all day trying to mess with things and opening and closing the grill like I did with the brisket. I don't really feel like I learned a lot from that or got better from it. I just think I got lucky this time. Oh well, I'm gonna go do something else for 2 hours so this can smoke. Obviously I do monitor the temperature and make sure that things aren't going crazy every few minutes, and it stayed steady. I am going to open and spritz every 30 to 45 minutes. Today I'm just using a mixture of half apple cider vinegar and half water just to dilute it a bit. Really, any liquid is going to create steam on the surface of the meat, which is going to help make the bark really nice at the end. By the way, I'm not doing the 3-2-1 method here because that makes really fall off the bone ribs, and I don't want that. I want bite off the bone ribs. So after 2 hours of smoking, I'm going to bring these inside and start to wrap them in foil. Before wrapping, I'm going to add 4 tablespoons of butter to each rack of ribs and then a handful of brown sugar. This is going to create a nice braising liquid inside the foil for the ribs to absorb more flavor. At this point, I'm going to flip them to be bone side up so that the meat can sit inside the liquid. Load those back on the grill and then close up. Mine's setting at like 280 degrees Fahrenheit still, which is great. I let this go for another hour and a half undisturbed. Things were definitely seeming promising. We're almost done. One more step is to take this back out and unwrap the foil, and I'm going to coat these in barbecue sauce for the final part of the cook. You can definitely get by with your favorite store-bought barbecue sauce. It'll taste great, but since this is a cooking channel, I'm going to make some. I actually made this during the first part of the cook, but it makes more sense to talk about it here. Into a sauce pot, I'm starting with lots and lots of ketchup. I'll put all the ingredient amounts below. A few splashes of apple cider vinegar, a handful of brown sugar, and some extra molasses to give it even more of that deep flavor. Some Worcestershire sauce and some spicy mustard. Any mustard will do. I'm finishing with some salt and pepper to start, as well as some of that barbecue rub because I have some left over. And a few glugs of hot sauce, and then one controversial ingredient. Yeah, I'm going to add soy sauce to my barbecue sauce because I like the flavor of umami and it's going to boost it here. Definitely leave it out if it offends you. I'm also adding a little bit of water to loosen this up and let it have more time to cook before it would burn. I'm whisking all that together over medium heat until it comes to a boil. Then I'll lower that to a simmer and let that sit for 30 minutes to an hour. The water gives it time to reduce and let the flavors develop. Just whenever it reduces to your desired consistency, you can taste it for seasoning. I usually always need a little bit more salt and pepper. And then I'm going to funnel that into a squeeze bottle so that I can easily serve it later. It's good to make this in advance so you can stick it in the fridge and start to let it cool down because it tastes better at that point. But I made enough to both coat my ribs and then also to serve at the table. At this point, I'm just going to coat the tops of all of my ribs and then spread that across evenly. Caramelizing a bit of this barbecue sauce at the end of the cook is really going to enhance the flavor and texture of everything. It's just a nice glaze to have already built in. These get loaded bone side down back onto my grill one more time. I opened the vents just a bit here so I could get a little bit more heat to caramelize this barbecue sauce. It probably went just a little over 300 degrees Fahrenheit. I let that go untouched for an hour and then I was done. You would definitely be fine to serve these immediately because you don't need to rest it like brisket. But if you're like me, we weren't going to eat for another hour or so I decided to wrap these up to let them rest and keep warm until we were ready. I stuck them in a cooler like I would with a brisket and they were fine. To serve these, you can cut them into any portions you want. You could even go individual ribs. I did a few like that. I also cut some at 2 or 3 rib increments. Just check out the cross section and that pink smoke ring. Really hard to screw these up, especially if you can keep your temperature under control. So these came out great and we served them with a bunch of regular barbecue sides. I made Adam Ragusia's baked macaroni recipe. This, which just consists of American cheese and milk, is far better than any other recipe that I've made to this point. I still have yet to find a good roux-based recipe because it's always gritty and that flour is unnecessary in my opinion. Call my palate immature, but this stuff is the best. And yes, I'm aware of sodium citrate and using it with fancier cheeses. This stuff is still better. My parents made some baked beans and some coleslaw. My brother grilled up some smoked hot sausage and some corn and just served that barbecue sauce on the side, and this was a perfect plate. I did not get around to taste testing this because I was eating with my family. There were lots of leftovers, but I only managed to film myself eating the last bit without audio. The ribs came out miraculously tender, but not too tender to where they just fall completely apart like pulled pork. The smoke flavor is intense because it has time to penetrate and it's cooked slowly. The barbecue rub and the barbecue sauce give it a nice flavor and the bark is well established. Just a really pleasant meal that doesn't take all that much effort, all things considered. I really don't think I could nail the temperature as well as I did this time, at least not for a long time. but I definitely feel more confident with my Big Joe now, so hopefully I use it more often. For a while after the brisket, I was kind of traumatized and I didn't want to pull it out to cook with. But never give up on your dreams, there's always room to improve. Let me know what y'all think of this video and if you're proud of me for doing better with my Big Joe this time. As always, thank you all for watching, be blessed, and I'll see you next time.